Up from Slavery, Chapter 15, Part 2. The Story of Booker T. Washington. The story of Colonel Shaw and his black regiment has been told in gallant words, and then, after the singing of "Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord," Booker Washington arose. It was, of course, just the moment for him. The multitude, shaken out of its usual symphony concert calm, quivered with an excitement that was not suppressed. A dozen times it had sprung to its feet to cheer and wave and hurrah as one person. When this man of culture and voice and power, as well as dark skin, began and uttered the names of Stearns and of Andrew, feeling began to mount. You could see tears glisten in the eyes of soldiers and civilians. When the order turned to the colored soldiers on the platform, to the color bearer of Fort Wagner, who smilingly bore still the flag he had never lowered even when wounded, and said, "To you, to the scarred and scattered remnants of the 54th, who, with empty sleeve and wanting leg, have honored this occasion with your presence, to you, your commander is not dead. Though Boston erected no monument and history recorded no story, in you and in the loyal race which you represent, Robert Gould Shaw would have a monument which time could not wear away." Then came the climax of the emotion of the day and the hour. It was Roger Wolcott, as well as the governor of Massachusetts, the individual representative of the people's sympathy, as well as the chief magistrate, who had sprung first to his feet and cried, "Three cheers to Booker T. Washington." Among those on the platform was Sergeant William H. Kearny of New Bedford, Massachusetts, the brave colored officer who was the color bearer at Fort Wagner and held the American flag. In spite of the fact that a large part of his regiment was killed, he escaped and exclaimed after the battle was over, "The old flag never touched the ground." This First Sergeant Kearny held in his hands as he sat on the platform, and when I turned to address the survivors of the colored regiment who were present, and referred to Sergeant Kearny, he rose as if by instinct and raised the flag. It has been my privilege to witness a good many satisfactory and rather sensational demonstrations in connection with some of my public addresses, but in dramatic effect, I've never seen or experienced anything which equaled this. For a number of minutes, the audience seemed to entirely lose control of itself. In the general rejoicing throughout the country which followed the close of the Spanish-American War, peace celebrations were arranged in several of the large cities. I was asked by President William R. Harper of the University of Chicago, who was chairman of the Committee of Invitations for the celebration to be held in the city of Chicago, to deliver one of the addresses at the celebration there. I accepted the invitation and delivered two addresses there during the Jubilee week. The first of these, and the principal one, was given in the auditorium in the evening of Sunday, October 16th. This was the largest audience that I have ever addressed in any part of the country. And besides speaking in the main auditorium, I also addressed that same evening two overflow audiences in other parts of the city. It was said that there were 16,000 persons in the auditorium, and it seemed to me as if there were as many more on the outside trying to get in. It was impossible for any one to get near the entrance without the aid of a policeman. President William McKinley attended this meeting, as did also the members of his cabinet, many foreign ministers, and a large number of Army and Navy officers, many of whom had distinguished themselves in the war which I had just closed. The speakers, besides myself on Sunday evening, were Rabbi Emil G. Hirsch, Father Thomas P. Hodnett, and Dr. John H. Barrows. The Chicago Times-Herald, in describing the meeting, said of my address, "He pictured the Negro choosing slavery rather than extinction, recalled Crispus Attucks shedding his blood at the beginning of the American Revolution, that white Americans might be free, while black Americans remained in slavery. rehearsed the conduct of the Negroes with Jackson at the New Orleans, drew a vivid and pathetic picture of the Southern slaves protecting and supporting the families of their masters while the latter were fighting to perpetuate black slavery, recounted the bravery of colored troops at Port Hudson and Forts Wagner and Pillow, and braced the heroism of the black regiments that stormed El Caney and Santiago to give freedom to the enslaved people of Cuba, forgetting for the time being the unjust discrimination that law and custom made against them in their own country. In all these things, the speaker declared his race had chosen the better part. And then he made his eloquent appeal to the consciences of the white Americans. When you have gotten the full story of the heroic conduct of the Negro in the Spanish-American War, have heard it from the lips of Northern soldier and Southern soldier, from ex-abolitionists and ex-masters, then decide within yourselves whether a race that is thus willing to die for its country should not be given the highest opportunity to live for its country. The part of the speech which seemed to arouse the wildest and most sensational enthusiasm was that in which I thanked the President for his recognition of the Negro in his appointments during the Spanish-American War. The President was sitting in a box at the right of the stage. When I addressed him, I turned toward the box, and as I finished the sentence thanking him for his generosity, the whole audience rose and cheered again and again, waving handkerchiefs and hats and canes, until the President arose in the box and bowed his acknowledgments. At that, the enthusiasm broke out again, and the demonstration was almost indescribable. One portion of my audience in Chicago seemed to have been misunderstood by the Southern press, and some of the Southern papers took occasion to criticize me rather strongly. These criticisms continued for several weeks until I finally received a letter from the editor of the Age Herald, published in Birmingham, Alabama, asking me if I would say just what I meant by this part of my address. I replied to him in a letter which seemed to satisfy many critics. In this letter, I said that I had made it a rule never to say before a Northern audience anything that I would not say before an audience in the South. I said that I did not think it was necessary for me to go into extended explanations. If my 17 years of work in the heart of the South had not been explanation enough, I did not see how words could explain. I said that I made the same plea that I had made at my address at Atlanta for the blotting out of race prejudices in commercial and civil relations. I said that what is termed social recognition was a question which I had never discussed, and then I quoted from my Atlanta address what I had said there in regard to that subject. In meeting crowds of people at public gatherings, there was one type of individual that I dread. I mean the crank. I have become so accustomed to these people now that I can pick them out at a distance when I see them elbowing their way up to me. The average crank has a long beard, poorly cared for, a lean, narrow face, and wears a black coat. The front of his vest and coat are slick with grease, and his trousers bag at the knees. In Chicago, after I'd spoken at a meeting, I met one of these fellows. They usually have some process for curing all of the ills of the world at once. This Chicago specimen had a patent process by which, he said, Indian corn could be kept through a period of 3 or 4 years, and he felt sure that if the Negro race in the South would, as a whole, adopt this process, it would settle the whole race question. It mattered nothing that I tried to convince him that our present problem was to teach the Negroes how to produce enough corn to last them through 1 year. Another Chicago crank had a scheme by which he wanted me to join him in an effort to close up all the national banks in the country. If that was done, he felt sure it would put the Negro on his feet. A number of people who stand ready to consume one's time to no purpose is almost countless. At one time, I spoke before a large audience in Boston in the evening. The next morning, I was awakened by having a card brought to my room, and with it, a message that someone was anxious to see me. Thinking it must be something very important, I dressed hastily and went down. When I reached the hotel office, I found a blank and innocent-looking individual waiting for me, who coolly remarked, "I heard you talk at the meeting last night. I rather liked your talk. and so I came this morning to hear you talk some more. I am often asked how it is possible for me to superintend the work at Tuskegee and at the same time to be so much away from the school. In partial answer to this, I would say that I think I have learned, in some degree at least, to disregard the old maxim which says, do not get others to do that which you can do yourself. My motto, on the other hand, is do not do that which others can do as well. One of the most encouraging signs in connection with the Tuskegee School is found in the fact that the organization is so thorough that the daily work of the school is not dependent upon the presence of any one individual. The whole executive force, including instructors and clerks, now numbers 86. This force is so organized and so subdivided that the machinery of the school goes on day by day like clockwork. Most of our teachers have been connected with the institution for a number of years and are as much interested in it as I am. In my absence, Mr. Warren Logan, the treasurer, who has been at the school 17 years, is the executive. He is efficiently supported by Mrs. Washington and by my faithful secretary, Mr. Emmett J. Scott, who handles the bulk of my correspondence and keeps me in daily touch with the life of the school, and who also keeps me informed of whatever takes place in the South that concerns the race. I owe more to his tact, wisdom, and hard work than I can describe. The main executive work of the school, whether I am at Tuskegee or not, centers on what we call the Executive Council. This council meets twice a week and is composed of the 9 persons who are at the head of the 9 departments of the school. For example, Mrs. B.K. Bruce, the lady principal, the widow of the late ex-Senator Bruce, is a member of the council and represents it in all that pertains to the life of the girls at school. In addition to the Executive Council, there is a financial committee of 6 that meets every week and decides upon the expenditures for the week. Once a month, and sometimes oftener, there is a general meeting of all the instructors. Aside from these, there are innumerable smaller meetings, such as that of the instructors in the Phillips Hall Bible Training School, or of the instructors in the agricultural department. In order that I may keep in constant touch with the life of the institution, I have a system of reports so arranged that a record of the school's work reaches me every day in the year, no matter in what part of the country I am. I know by these reports even what students are excused from school and why they are excused, whether for reasons of ill health or otherwise. Through the medium of these reports, I know each day what the income of the school in money is. I know how many gallons of milk and how many pounds of butter come from the dairy, and what the bill of fare for the teachers and students is, whether a certain kind of meat was boiled or baked, and whether certain vegetables served in the dining room were bought from a store or procured from our own farm. Human nature I find to be very much the same the world over, and it is sometimes not hard to yield to the temptation to go to a barrel of rice that has just come from the store with the grain all prepared to go into the pot, rather than take the time and trouble to go to the field and dig and wash one's own sweet potatoes, which might be prepared in a manner to take the place of the rice. I am often asked how, in the midst of so much work, a large part of which is before the public, I can find time for any rest or recreation, and what kind of recreation or sports I am fond of. This is rather a difficult question to answer. I have a strong feeling that every individual owes it to himself and to the cause which he is serving to keep a vigorous, healthy body, with the nerves steady and strong, prepared for great efforts, and prepared for disappointments and trying positions. As far as I can, I make it a rule to plan for each day's work, not merely to go through the same routine of daily duties, but to get rid of the routine work as early in the day as possible, and then to enter upon some new or advanced work. I make it a rule to clear my desk every day before leaving my office of all correspondence and memorandum, so that on the morrow I can begin a new day of work. I make it a rule never to let my work drive me, but to so master it and to keep it in such complete control and to keep so far ahead of it that I will be the master instead of the servant. There is a physical and mental and spiritual enjoyment that comes from the conscientiousness of being the absolute master of one's work in all its details that is very satisfactory and inspiring. My experience teaches me that if one learns to follow this plan, he gets a freshness of body and vigor of mind out of work that goes a long way toward keeping him strong and healthy. I believe that when one can grow it to the point where he loves his work, this gives him a kind of strength that is most valuable. When I begin my work in the morning, I expect to have a successful and pleasant day of it. But at the same time, I prepare myself for unpleasant and unexpected hard places. I prepare myself to hear that one of our school buildings is on fire or has burned, or that some disagreeable accident has occurred, or that someone has abused me in a public address or printed article for something that I have done or omitted to do, or for something that he had heard that I said, probably something I'd never thought of saying. In 19 years of continuous work, I've taken but one vacation. That was 2 years ago when some of my friends put the money into my hands and forced Mrs. Washington and myself to spend 3 months in Europe. I have said that I believe it is the duty of everyone to keep his body in good condition. I try to look after the little ills with the idea that if I take care of the little ills, the big ones will not come. When I find myself unable to sleep well, I know that something is wrong. If I find any part of my system the least weak and not performing its duty, I consult a good physician. The ability to sleep well at any time and in any place I find of great advantage. I have so trained myself that I can lie down for a nap of 15 or 20 minutes and get up refreshed in body and mind. I've said that I make it a rule to finish up each day's work before leaving. There is perhaps one exception to this. When I have an unusually difficult question to decide, one that appeals strongly to the emotion, I find it a safe rule to sleep over it for a night or to wait until I've had an opportunity to talk it over with my wife and friends. As to my reading, the most time I get for solid reading is when I am on the cars. Newspapers are to me a constant source of delight and recreation. The only trouble is that I read too many of them. Fiction I care little for. Frequently, I have to almost force myself to read a novel that is on everyone's lips. The kind of reading that I have the greatest fondness for is biography. I like to be sure that I am reading about a real man or a real thing. I think I do not go far when I say that I have read nearly every book and magazine article that has been written about Abraham Lincoln. In literature, he is my patron saint. Out of the 12 months in a year, I suppose that, on an average, I spend 6 months away from Tuskegee. While my being absent from the school so much unquestionably has its disadvantages, yet there are at the same time some compensations. The change of work brings a certain kind of rest. I enjoy a ride of a long distance on the car, when I am permitted to ride where I can be comfortable. I get rest on the cars, except when the inevitable individual who seems to be on every train approaches me with the now familiar phrase, "Isn't this Booker Washington?" I want to introduce myself to you. Absence from the school enables me to lose sight of the unimportant details of the work and to study in a broader and more comprehensive manner than I could do on the grounds. This absence also brings me into contact with the best work being done in educational lines and into contact with the best educators in the land. But after all this is said, the time when I get the most solid rest and recreation is when I can be at Tuskegee and, after our evening meal is over, can sit down, as is our custom, with my wife and Portia and Booker and Davidson, my 3 children, and read a story, or each take turns in telling a story. To me, there is nothing on earth equal to that, although what is nearly equal to it is to go with them for an hour or more, as we like to do on Sunday afternoons, into the woods where we can live for a while near the heart of nature, where no one can disturb or vex us, surrounded by pure air, the trees, the shrubbery, the flowers, and the sweet fragrance that springs from 100 plants, enjoying the chirp of the crickets and the songs of the birds. This is a solid rest. My garden also, while little time I can be at Tuskegee, is another source of rest and enjoyment. Somehow, I like, as often as possible, to touch nature, not something that is artificial or an imitation, but the real thing. When I can leave my office in time so that I can spend 30 or 40 minutes in spading the ground, in planting seeds, in digging about the plants, I feel that I am coming into contact with something that is giving me strength for the many duties and hard places that await me out in the big world. I pity the man or woman who has never learned to enjoy nature and to get strength and inspiration out of it. Aside from the large number of fowls and animals kept by the school, I keep individually a number of pigs and fowls at the best grades, and in raising these, I take a great deal of pleasure. I think the pig is my favorite animal. Few things are more satisfactory to me than a high grade Berkshire or Poland China pig. Games I care little for. I've never seen a game of football. In cards, I do not know one card from another. A game of old fashioned marbles with two boys, once in a while, is all I care for in this direction. I suppose I would care for the games now if I had any time in my youth to give to them, but that was not possible. And we'll continue with chapter 16 in the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you guys. I love you. As Tigger says, ta-ta for now.